Tradition at the Center for 21st Century Studies annual conferences that we end them not with some sort of resounding summary, not with a yes, but with an attempt to describe and reflect on what has come before us. I think the debate, or the interpretation there of retrenchment was a very instructive one, because as many of you got in the discussion, it means both to withdraw and to fortify and to cut a second time, which is, I think, a nice way of summarizing what it is we're going to be doing here for the next 45 minutes or so. The other aspect of this is that instead of a tennis court where questions are thrown at the experts at the front and answers are lobbed back, we really like this to be a process of a sort of roomful discussion. That is, what was the experience of the Big No like for all of us? What was your expectation and the result? What were the surprises and the questions that you're still left with? And so there is not a need to address questions to the people in the front of the room. The people in the front of the room are participants in the conference in the same way that everybody here is. So I invite comments, larger questions, reflections from anybody who would like to bring them forward.
Would it be okay to ask a question about the lecture we just heard?
That would be fine. We have Ivan up here doing yeoman's duty and translating.
Okay, so I think I'll just ask it in the simplest possible form, which is simply that we know about excess in quantum mechanics. We know about excess in the work of Jacques Derrida, which probably is more of a, shall we say, semantic order. And so one very simple question is, what is the relationship between the two? Is it, and if it's something like Kant's moral law and starry heavens, still I'd like to know more, because the suspicion is that there's a qualitative difference between those two forms of excess.
I'm sorry, can you recap on the content?
Well, just like Kant is imagining that there's some relationship between the moral law within and the starry heavens above. But what it is exactly is another question. So one could go in a religious direction, one could go in a physics direction, something like anthropic cosmic principle, and with semantics, meaning, etc., versus quantum indeterminacy. The suspicion is they're of qualitatively different orders. So what would be the relationship? And just one other thing out of my own curiosity, if we could just hear one word or two about the musical messianism. And I can't help but think of Olivier Messiaen, and so that's what I thought at first was being said, actually. Thank you.
Pour le messianisme musical, c'est le second volet de la dialectique descendante. C'est-à-dire, je suppose que il y a non seulement une conjugaison, sa dialectique ascendante de la philosophie et de la science.
Je vais arrêter un instant. As for the musical messianism, that's the descending dialectic. I suppose first that there is an ascending dialectic.
On peut regarder toute la montée, en quelque sorte, à travers la philosophie et la science. On peut la regarder justement depuis le sommet, si je puis dire. Et pour moi, le sommet, c'est... Alors, j'ai peut-être un peu de mal à expliquer pourquoi, comme cela de but en blanc, pourquoi ce serait la musique. Mon problème ultime, c'est de penser l'unité de la musique et de la philosophie.
We can look at the first dialectic of science and philosophy from the heights or from the top. I suppose my difficulty is in explaining why the descending dialectic will be musical.
Normalement, je suis très embarrassé. Vous voyez.
He finds it awkward, but I can assure you that it's not half as awkward as I feel. Bien moins embarrassé que moi.
Oui. Si vous voulez, je prends un point de départ qui est Socrate. La philosophie est la plus belle des musiques.
He takes it as point of
La plus
departure.
haute des musiques.
Socrates, who says that philosophy is the most beautiful and highest of musics.
Alors, pour des raisons, disons, de goût personnel, j'ai pris Socrate au pied de la lettre, en quelque sorte, et j'entends essayer de montrer que la philosophie, à la fois par le rythme, par la structure harmonique et rythmique, fournit un appoint qui peut, à la philosophie qui peut se comprendre relativement avec des concepts même philosophiques. Enfin, je m'excuse, je suis très embarrassé.
I'm not going to do justice to his thinking, but that he says that because of personal proclivities and taste, he took Socrates literally and figures that music in its harmony and rhythmic structure gives philosophy some kind of bearing or some support.
Vous me faites sortir de la philosophie,
You're asking me to leave philosophy,
de laquelle je ne demande pas mieux que de sortir,
and I ask only to exit philosophy.
mais une fois arrivé dans la musique,
But once I've arrived in music,
ce sont deux genres tellement différents,
there are such disparate or different genres,
surtout à partir du moment où l'on doit convoquer le son.
especially once one has to summon or convoke sound.
Alors, je vous dis le principe de la solution que je cherche, sinon que j'ai trouvé.
So the principle of the solution that I'm looking for, if not the solution that I've found,
Eh bien, c'est le principe que la philosophie est une musique insonore.
is that philosophy is insonorous music.
Insonore, elle est parlée,
It is spoken.
mais je ne suis pas sûr que la parole, qui a beaucoup de traits musicaux, évidemment, puisse remplacer franchement la musique.
But I'm not sure that speech, which has obviously musical traits, can frankly replace music.
C'est une... à la philosophie, bon, je suis très partagé. Il manquera de toute façon toujours, d'une certaine manière, la musique.
Philosophy will always, in a way, be lacking music.
C'est-à-dire, j'ai tendance à poser une sorte de supériorité de la musique, mais qui est un art. La musique est un art, c'est pas la philosophie.
I tend to pose or assume a superiority to music over philosophy, but philosophy is not an art.
Et tout le problème est de savoir si on peut comparer quelque chose qui est un genre, et la philosophie qui est plus que générique, qui est plus qu'un genre, qui prétend être transcendantal.
And the question is whether one can compare something that is a genre, art, and philosophy, which aspires to be something more than genre, which is transcendental.
Donc Socrate me pose un sérieux problème quand il dit que la philosophie, c'est la plus belle des musiques.
So Socrates leaves me with a serious problem when he says that philosophy is the most beautiful of musics.
Ça veut dire qu'il pose un point de comparaison quand même avec la musique.
He's giving a point of comparison with music.
Et ensuite, il élève quand même la philosophie à un niveau qu'il veut absolument dernier, ultime.
And yet he elevates philosophy to a level that he wants to be ultimate.
Mais en prenant la musique comme point de
But
départ.
by taking music as its point of departure.
C'est très compliqué tout ça.
It's very complicated, all that.
I have a question that I think can be extrapolated to the conference in general and some of the panels that I missed.
You could speak up so people can hear you.
I have a question that I think can be extrapolated to the greater conference in some of the panels that I missed. And there is a recent trickle of work uniting or bringing together non-philosophy and Afro-pessimism, but I guess my question is mostly for Dr. Wilderson, who I know you write on Gramsci and Marx and blackness or the non-consideration of the slave for Gramsci, and I'm just wondering if during the conference, you had any thoughts about the way that, especially that Kolozova talked about non-Marxism might have some bearing on the way that you think about, I guess, Gramsci and his relationship to the slave? If that makes sense?
It does. I'm sorry to say that I missed that paper, yes. But in the spirit of this session, what do you think? Is that a shrewd pedagogic move or what? No, I know because we did a workshop together at Western University, so I'm genuinely serious to hear what your considerations are. I mean, I could speak more broadly, but not specifically to the paper that you're talking about. But tell me what motivates the question.
It was listening to the discussion of non-Marxism, as I think the word defanged was thrown around, as physical, and also Laruelle's earlier insistence on leaving the economics, I suppose. And I know that you also sort of insist, I guess, following other thinkers, that slavery can't simply be understood as economics, that that's not, that doesn't do it justice or really have any meaning. And so I was just thinking, and there are, like I said, there are people who do work on this more thoroughly, that maybe there is a fruitful connection to be made with a sort of Marxism that has been defanged of, I guess, the sufficiency of economics and materialistic history that might also speak to the barriers that you see as, or the insufficiency, I guess, of Marxism in addressing blackness, I suppose?
Yeah, I hear you. So rather than answer the question, I'll just throw out some impressionistic thoughts that you've stimulated. And so I don't have an answer for the question of this potential implication that you're talking about. But I do think that there's a problem of thought in that what we have as Jared Sexton would say, social death does not travel. And so what he means by that is that social death constitutes blackness, as opposed to the way Patterson would think of it as an experience that different cultures have from time to time. And in my talk, I use the word people being recruited into social death. And so what's interesting, and what people like Hartman and myself and Sexton, and I think most pointedly David Marriott would be arguing, is that built into, and I can't speak to non-Marxist Marxism, but what I was trying to say with respect to Gramsci and later with others, is that the idea of dispossession is not something that carries over into thinking black subjugation, because dispossession suggests that something has been lost. And so what we're arguing is that the regime of violence, which actually elaborates and positions the black qua slave, qua social death, and you're absolutely right, taking chattel slavery out of the definition of slavery, taking forced labor out of the definition, but articulating it as a relational or a non-relational dynamic, is such that the word would not be dispossession or loss, but be absence and objection. And absence and objection mean that blackness then presents the ontology of narrative with a kind of rupture. In other words, you actually can't, whether it's economic loss, whether it's cultural loss, you can't tell that story. And the reason why that's so important is because the black then stands as that which makes dispossession writ large conceptually coherent for everyone else in the world. So that would be my shorthand answer. And as I said in my talk, the way we get there is by suggesting and arguing that violence has as its principle, its paradigmatic principle, not the utility of the extraction of surplus value, not the utility of the occupation of land for Native Americans, for example. But if there is a utility, then it is the kind of psychic wholeness that is presented to everyone else, who then can coherently understand loss by looking at absence and objection.
It's in the same vein as that question, but it's in the same vein as that. It's in the same vein as that question, but addressed to everyone, really, because of the theme of the conference. So I'll start with the question of Afro-pessimism, and it also has to do with the question of this recent theme of ending the world, which is in Césaire and Fanon. You talked about it too, Mr. Clover. And it's all over the theme of non-philosophy, and so I wonder if the question of blackness is moved is in an ontological level, or as in your talk, it was a problem with the world as such, or ontology as such, and connecting it with Professor Laruelle's work is that philosophy is a way of structuring thought for the world, and similarly non-blackness is a way of structuring thought for the world. So the problem shifts to a question of ontological sovereignty, and you have to examine the question of ontology or thought as class struggle, and I wonder if that excludes blackness, and I wonder if that's a way of thinking about it.
If I may interject, could you restate that last bit about ontology and class struggle in a manner that I might...
I wonder if ontology would then constitute ontology seems to constitute, various philosophers that have thought of ontology. So would ontology then constitute the field wherein class struggle is enacted that excludes blackness, for instance? It's the world that excludes blackness, so you have to move that to the realm of thought.
I have an answer, but I'd like other people to maybe talk about that.
Anyone?
We could treat that as a comment.
Yeah.
That's a comment and just general provocation, and I'd like to hear. So.
Other provocation.
Well, it could be an answer in a way to the previous question as well. Okay, first, an answer to your question, a direct answer. No, I don't think that ontology is the answer or the solution. Actually, I see it as a problem because I see it as part of the problem of philosophy's principle of sufficiency. What I could identify as similarity between Professor Wilderson's and Laruelle's philosophy and Laruelle's non-philosophy, and perhaps my intervention, non-Marxist or non-humanist in it, is what is there in common is an attempt to think non-relationally, to propose that non-relational thinking is possible, which sounds like an aporia. I don't know what Wilderson's solution to this is. I'm aware of Laruelle's solution, the method of dualysis and correlational thinking with the real. Then there is another similarity. Some sort of an attempt to conceive of, this is how I interpret your lecture, I don't know if it's correct, some sort of, I will use this as a common denominator, some sort of proto-subjectivity, so something which is prior to the formation of subjectivity, which implicates subjectivity, but which is still pre-subjective, pre-linguistic. Perhaps I explained it yesterday through that radical diet. Now, how is that pre-subjectivity enacted politically? How can it be made, instrumental somehow politically? How can we make use of it? This is a huge question. As for feminism and non-Marxism, the proposal would be to operate with philosophical materials, so with representation, with language, that is with representation, but go beyond the logic of representation in politics as well. That is why one of the propositions would be correlating as if with the real, as in Laruelle's method, correlating with the body, but in that sense, not in, Sarah Ahmed's sense, or, because there it's already represented. So to take it as an instance of the real, and in order not to end up in tautology, to expand it through non-philosophical use of Marx to some form of materialism, the one with which goes beyond philosophy, the one which is not determined by philosophy but rather by the Laruelle, so by method of non-philosophy. That was one of the propositions yesterday. This can be also, I don't know, my attempt in the lived revolution sort of, I hope, illustrate that it can be transformed into something which deals with concrete issues, which is not just abstraction, just metaphysics. And there are modalities of the real or forms of bodily suffering that are concrete. So if you do not speak of the real abstractly, of the real in some Lacanian sense, but depart from concrete instantiations of the real, and use the method of cloning proposed by Laruelle, you end up discussing concrete realities without being caught up in this vicious circle of tautology. So, but it would be a long elaboration now to go into those examples, but yeah, that's one of the proposals, I guess.
Yeah, I guess it's, at this late juncture of the conference, it's my last chance to admit to total confusion. One of the things I'm sort of confused about is who this Marx person is. That we keep talking about. In that we've heard sort of both that we have to go beyond Marxist philosophy via this materialism that passes beyond it, and moreover that we need to might benefit from removing economics from Marx. And of course what puzzles me is that those two characteristics define Marx's work in its entirety. In the history of economic thought, since the physiocrats, let's say, as a starting point, classical economics, the single greatest critique of economy and economics is Marx, right? He's the one who insists that the categories, that's why it's a critique of political economy. He insists the categories of economics have to be challenged and in fact entirely unmade. So that's sort of already constitutive of Marx, as is his insistence that materialism, which for him of course is not physicality, but the definite relations into which people enter to produce their own lives, always precedes philosophy and doesn't go beyond it, but precedes it, so that philosophy can only be sort of a form of thought which trails it, and so doesn't need to be transcended since it has already preceded. So so I just want to register my perplexity at the Marx we're producing as opposed to the Marx I have read some books by.
No, I don't think we could or should evacuate economics from Marx. I think that his interpretation of the capitalist society through the analysis of economics is what makes it a materialist interpretation of society of his kind, according to his unique method. So when I propose to go beyond the philosophical understanding or use of materialism, I mean actually sticking to Marx's version of materialism, which is pre-philosophical or post-philosophical and is grounded in economics. But I think that its consequences are beyond economy, that its consequences are epistemological, and even further than that, that they are metaphysical, that he proposes a new form of metaphysics which is beyond philosophy or post-philosophical. So I affirm the economical analysis, but I insist that the consequences are greater than that. So that would be an explanation.
So to see everybody else. I don't
is true.
I don't hear anyone reducing Marx to sort of an economist, like that sort of a straw man Marx. No one's doing.
All right, but that wasn't even the topic of my talk. You saw it as a problem, so I'm explaining. François, tu veux? Oui, est-ce qu'on peut regardez ensemble?
Je crois qu'on peut peut-être essayer d'élaborer le marxisme comme modèle ou métamodèle, enfin, d'interprétation possible d'une société qui ne serait pas fondée essentiellement sur l'économie.
I think we can attempt to elaborate Marxism or vision of Marxism as a meta model of a society that isn't based or grounded in the economy.
Évidemment, ce qui m'intéresse dans Marx, c'est l'effort pour dépasser la philosophie ou un certain type d'autorité de la philosophie et aussi de l'économie.
So what interests me in Marx, obviously, is a certain attempt to move beyond philosophy or the authority of philosophy, but also of economics. And here, I think maybe vous entendez les causes
Pas capable vraiment de répondre de manière précise à vos questions.
We're not quite capable of responding in a precise manner to these questions.
Yeah, it's purely a comment in the spirit of like half an hour ago. Purely a comment about the conference, but about precision. I'm deeply thankful to have been here for this entire weekend, both for everyone up front and every paper that I saw. The amount of one can go to a conference that has a strong theory element and leave with very little. Like that's possible, and the amount of strong argument and incredibly precise argument. Like I don't feel like I've wasted a single minute. Like I've enjoyed literally the entirety of it, which is I think a rare thing for me. Maybe I'm deeply cynical and pessimistic. But I just wanted to say that I really am deeply grateful for everything that I've seen this evening. So that's my meta comment.
Thank you.
I enjoyed it too.
Since Ariana hasn't gotten into this argument, can we invite you in? Or to have
I'm very happy, enjoying the privilege of not being part of this argument. Thank you for the invitation. Politely declined.
As someone suggested to me earlier, the suggestion was that we end the conference with a rousing chant of no. And this person pointed out that anyone who refused to go along would be interpolated into refusal by their very declining of participation. I thought that was very clever and particularly too clever. So maybe we can leave with a reminder of the different no's which have bubbled up, not just through the plenary speeches, but in the breakout sessions and the interstices, but the ways in which not only people like Marx, but people like Fanon have appeared in this discussion, the roles of feminism and of the body that reappear, of the digital and the non-digital, which emerge, and of language and of poetry, which for the various insistences that many people have had here on the non-linguistic character of the contemporary, the power of language also seems to reemerge both in response to that and as maybe a fellow traveler. Similarly, I would like to express my appreciation, our appreciation to all of you who've been part of this conversation and these arguments. And I hope we can continue the ideas of this past few days over the long intellectual trajectory of our work. So thank you all. Please join me in thanking our plenary speakers and one another.